how does the hardcore, heavily involved Star Wars fandom react to new Star Wars live action content? And why do they react in the way that they do? These two questions have been kind of plaguing me for the past month, really. Ever since I realized how many people seem to enjoy The Mandalorian and how many people seem to dislike The Rise of Skywalker and the sequel trilogy in general. For the record, I'm using nothing scientific here, purely my own anecdotal ramblings. With that said, as far as I can tell, The Mandalorian is liked by a vast majority of Star Wars fans. A vast majority of the Star Wars fans that I know, and the people even of the more casual variety, really love The Mandalorian for what it is. Meanwhile, The Rise of Skywalker upset a lot of people, myself included, in a lot of ways. The Last Jedi upset a lot of people, not myself included in that category. Now, one of those two reasons, which is much more easy to package than the other one, so we'll start with that one, comes down to plain and simply expectations regarding how long we get until the next installment and what do we do with that time in between installments. What do we do with that 2-year gap in between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and then in between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker? The problem is, and I know I'm guilty of this, you write the whole damn sequel in your head by about 8 months before the other one comes out. For me, I already knew what The Last Jedi was going to be before I even knew The Last Jedi title, and then The Last Jedi trailer and title came up, and then everything got thrown for a loop. And all of my thoughts and theories and stuff were completely changed, and then I ran with a bunch of ideas about what was going to happen based on the trailers. And then I wrote a whole movie based on 3.5 minutes of trailer screen time. And then The Rise of Skywalker came out, and I was pumped walking into The Rise of Skywalker. I was ready to rock and roll. Except it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. Whereas The Last Jedi was kind of closer to what I was expecting it to be. I was expecting it to be strange and a little bit more artsy and not do the stereotypical thing or the expected things. And that's why I love The Last Jedi so much. What would have happened if I wrote what I thought The Last Jedi should have been during that 2-year period in between December 2015 and December 2017? I probably would have really disliked The Last Jedi. I kind of expected what The Last Jedi was going to be, and I got what I was expecting, and I was very happy with it. Meanwhile, you have all these different fan groups that completely wrote the entire end of the Skywalker saga and wrote all their wish lists and predictions and this, that, and the other thing. Why? Because that's what we had to talk about for the 2 years in between, or excuse me, the 1.5 years after Solo and before Mandalorian / The Rise of Skywalker came out. So just to recap, the first reason is basically the release schedule. It comes down to the problem where you have 2 years to speculate on the next episode of your favorite television show. You're going to have 8 different ways that you write it up, and that's going to be completely different from the 10th way that they actually wrote it up in the studio and in the writer's room. You're going to run into those issues where the creator is going to tell a story that speaks to them and not necessarily that speaks to you. And you just kind of have to hope that they land on the same spot as you have been hoping for the past year, 1.5 years, 2 years. Now, the second reason, and really the reason why I'm making this video, and I think a much more complicated and a much bigger reason as to why there's such a gulf in between how many people that love The Mandalorian versus how many people love The Rise of Skywalker / the sequel trilogy. One is not tied and weighed down by the past. Now, this can be rolled into expectations, but this isn't revolving around theories of expectations. This is revolving around the fact that Star Wars needs to, in my opinion, step off old things. These old characters, specifically name characters, the Skywalkers, the Solos, the etc., the time period set in universe. It just doesn't work in a lot of ways when you are walking out with Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford and Peter Mayhew and da-da-da-da-da. They're all coming back to reprise their roles in episode 7. And I was literally waiting my entire life for that story, for what happens after Empire. Yes, I read the Timothy Zahn trilogy and all the X-Wing books and stuff like that, sure. But it's not the same thing for me as a hyper-visual person as actually seeing these stories play out on screen with those characters, with those actors portraying those characters. At the time that The Force Awakens came out, they had 38 and a half years of nostalgia crushing that story. Everything from playground arguments to early Yahoo chat room arguments to Reddit arguments to Twitter arguments. Those disagreements through the decades and those differing opinions through the decades all kind of coalesced on top of that sequel trilogy, and everybody expected Luke Skywalker to walk out like some bamf, just ready to start flinging walkers everywhere. That's one of the reasons why I'm so against seeing Boba Fett show up in the season 2 of The Mandalorian. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I know I get it. I don't really like Boba Fett. I think he's overhyped, whatever. It's not about the fact that I don't like the character. It's that I don't want a damn anyone showing back up in a show that has done an incredibly good job of building up Cara Dune, Din Djarin, Baby Yoda's character and his relationship with the Mandalorian. We have new, fresh characters that have zero nostalgia built up on top of them that they can grow organically in the way that the writers feel they should grow. And for you, because that's going to be our, not even you, but our first impression of that character, therefore that's what that character is going to be in their mind, as opposed to, well, wait a minute, Boba Fett was supposed to be evil. That's what I decided back in 1988, back on the high school playground, or back on the middle school recess, whatever, when I was arguing with my friend Jimmy and Sarah. You're going to run into these issues whenever you introduce classic characters. I think that that's a big reason why Solo did so poorly at the box office. Yes, it was very poorly timed. Yes, it was rushed. It came out just after frickin' Infinity War and just before Deadpool 2, and yikes, right? But I can tell you that most of my casual Star Wars friends, my coworkers, etc., they knew about Solo. They just didn't care. They already had an idea of what Han Solo's youth was. They didn't want that. They wanted another Rogue One where we get new characters, sure, in a similar time frame and very heavily attached to something that we have known since, 1977, but it doesn't involve a specific legacy character. That's one reason why, as excited as I am for Kenobi, I am absolutely terrified of the fandom response, even though that I've been very less active on social media, and I've been very much enjoying just downloading my comicsologies and reading those on breaks at work instead of Twitter. Thank you very much. I am still very fearful of how that response is going to be, because you're going to have kids, or people who were kids like me, who grew up loving Obi-Wan Kenobi from the prequels, and they changed that in a way that a lot of prequel people aren't going to like. Well, wait, no, he was always on Tatooine. Why is he going off Tatooine? This is wrong. He would never leave, blah, 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 blah. Or, wait, why didn't he leave? I imagined him always going off and doing crazy wild adventures. And why didn't they had a perfect lead in order to do a Darth Vader redemption thing. And that's why he said, Obi-Wan once thought as you did. You're going to run into these issues whenever you have a legacy character showing up. I'm even much more comfortable with the Cassian series. Why? Because Cassian is from 2016. There hasn't been enough time for that nostalgia to be built up. Either way, I am incredibly excited that The Mandalorian is doing as well as it is, both financially for Disney and Lucasfilm, as well as how successful it is inside of the Star Wars fandom culture. That's one of the reasons why I don't talk about The Rise of Skywalker all that much. I do love certain parts of it, but there's a lot of it that I just get really hung up on. Why? Because I was able to write out what I was expecting. And I could rewrite the entire movie in my head into a way that I would have liked much better. Whereas with The Last Jedi, all I can think of is I wish if they would have tweaked the way that Luke tossed the lightsaber. Instead of tossing it over his shoulder, he should have done it like, you know, like kind of sideways like this, like tossed it kind of like he did in Return of the Jedi. But that's just it. It's all about our own personal journeys. And I don't think that Lucasfilm and Disney is going to be able to break free of a lot of people's personal journeys with these characters if they keep telling stories about these characters. That's why I've been such a proponent of new, interesting characters like what we get in The Mandalorian, like Cara Dune. Heck, like the Resistance cast of characters that we get out of that show. It is what it is. Either way, I am incredibly excited for the future of Star Wars. I just really, really hope that they step away from that Skywalker saga era. I really hope that they step away at least from these legacy characters. I would love to see Alden Ehrenreich back as Han, but I will happily accept the adventures of, I don't know, Woomy Dion from the High Republic era. Give me that trilogy of movies. That's kind of where I'm leaning at. I just kind of want to see us step away from this nostalgia. Not nostalgia bait. I get it. I get the drive and the interest in that. I just feel like that's one of the biggest reasons why the fandom culture keeps getting pounded, or rather why it keeps tearing itself apart, is really what it is. That and just people suck. But, oh well. Anyways, thank you guys very much for watching, and I love you all very much. Be good to each other, and as always, may the Force be with you. Take care.